So you want to build a Web3 game? Well, there's a lot that goes into it, not the least of which is the actual software development. Now, maybe you're a dev or you know a dev and you guys can build it yourselves. But what if you aren't a dev? Or what if you don't know any devs that you can trust? What if this is the first time you're building a game and you're unsure about what all the parts are that got to go into it? Or what if you just want some support to make sure you don't screw the whole thing up? Then you should consider hiring a Web3 gaming studio. Today, we talk with Zander from Animus Labs. They're a Web3 gaming studio for hire that's been involved with great games on Arbitrum like Smol Age and SmithyDao, which they now own, not to mention a number of other titles on Berachain and Polygon. On this episode, Zander will help us to understand when you should consider hiring a dev shop and how to pick one. We cover things like what to do before you reach out to them, how to come up with a plan and a budget, how does contracting work, and how much does all this stuff cost? What are the characteristics and habits of founders that make it? And what are those of the ones that don't? If you're interested in building a Web3 game and you think you may need some help, then this episode is for you. Also, I mentioned that Animus Labs acquired SmithyDao. We're going to drop a second episode with Xander to discuss just that. Keep an eye out for it in the days ahead. But first, how do you pick a Web3 gaming studio? Here we go.
Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Smol. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum.
Hey everybody, Smol here. Welcome to Ready Layer 2. I'm really excited to bring you today's guest, someone that's behind the scenes on a lot of the projects that you know and love on Arbitrum and beyond. Super excited to have you on, man. Zander, Animus Labs, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I look forward to diving into today's subject and giving a background on who Animus is, what we're building, and what we're looking to do and launch within the Arbitrum ecosystem.
Absolutely. And real quick, I just want to give a shout out to my friend Hot Tub Guapi, who introduced us. I always got to appreciate my friends when they bring me to good people. So thanks for that, man. But Zander, I want you to just start us off here by telling us about Animus Labs. What do you guys do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, Animus Labs, we're a Web3 game development studio. We build for hire, as well as we build some games in-house, solely owned by Animus. We build from A to Z. We can do contracts, we do game development as far as designing, developing, we do the art. So if you need it, we can build it. And we have a number of projects that we're building currently. Probably most notably currently would be SmithyDao within Arbitrum. Many of our fans know it, love it. We're sad that it was going away and we decided to pick it up. We also developed Smol Age. That's not our project. We're building it for hire for that team over there. Those guys are great. We love them. We also build a game called Berachain that's going to be launching on a new layer 1 called Berachain. Another game called Berachain that will be launching as well on Berachain. We have 2 games that are being built on Polygon. One is called Gold Ink and the other one's called Stellar Extraction.
Yeah, man. So you got your hands in a lot of stuff. And what I think is really neat for the listener here and what makes you a great guest is that you're doing it for yourself with SmithyDao and you're doing it for others in various settings. Obviously, we focus on Arbitrum here, but a lot of what I want to explore with you today is really going to be pretty chain agnostic. It doesn't matter. And specifically what I want to do is we're going to break this into 2 parts for you, the listener. And the first part's going to be all about really targeting you founders that have a game idea or aspire to someday go out and build one yourself and talk to you about what is that process like? How do you engage a software dev shop that can help you build it out? At what point do you do that, et cetera, et cetera. Second part of this, we're going to dive into SmithyDao, obviously a project that was endeared to the community. People were really sad when it went away. It was definitely something that people seemed to like a lot, be looking forward to. And then you guys picked that up and are going to be carrying that forward. So we're going to do a whole second part that focuses on SmithyDao, and that'll be released a day or 2 after this one. So you can go ahead and look for that as well if that's what you're interested in. But set us up for today, Zander, is the dev shop, the company. Like, how do I engage with somebody like you, a team like yours, to go and build something? And I want to take it all the way like to the very beginning of this. If I did have an idea for a game, what do I need to do before I'm even ready to go looking for a software shop to help me out?
Yeah, so I'd imagine there's a handful of things that you're going to want to do as a startup founder, somebody who wants to create a game. Obviously, you want to come up with an idea. What kind of game do you want? Is it going to be a first-person shooter? Is it going to be a dungeon crawler, a card game? So you really want to come up with that idea of what am I trying to create? Who am I trying to cater to is obviously really big. Is it people that are just looking to flip NFTs? Is it somebody who wants to hold value in their NFTs? Is it going to be tons and tons of NFTs that add on to characters and things like that? What are the intricacies of your game? You definitely want to start with the idea, come up with a budget, and have a keen sense on a timeline of how long you're looking for this to take to develop. Game development obviously takes a long time. I think some of that is skewed within crypto. A lot of people believe that these things can be built very quickly and it's a 6-month turnaround to put out a decent game. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. Good things take a long time to develop. A decent game, even at its bare minimum, is probably going to run you about a year. So having a fair sense of time and how long these things take to develop and a realistic time horizon is also really important before you decide to jump into hiring a dev studio who will be able to build it. We don't want to agree to terms that don't seem realistic. The opposite could be said for a dev studio actually taking on clients, right? If we get a client that has unrealistic time goals, it's for us, it would look really bad to take on a project and say, yeah, we can build this in 6 months, but instead we know it's going to take a year. We take the project on and at 6-month mark, we're like, hey, we're definitely going to need a couple more months. It just looks worse for us as a dev studio. Yeah, definitely. Those would probably be the most important things, making sure that you have a good idea. Who are you catering to? What kind of game is it? And then having a good budget.
Yeah, right on. So a couple of things. I think that's all great starting point. One is, having worked in custom dev myself for a long time, whenever I talk to somebody about this, like the kind of number one piece of advice I give is it's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder and more work for you, even as the non-developer, as the client, than you think. And it's going to be more expensive than you're thinking in many cases, right? Because like exactly what you said, these things, they take a lot of time and they're hard. People think software is easy because it's kind of like, the programmers just poof it into existence and you don't need materials and stuff. So I could have whatever I want and it's fast and it's easy. And that's just flat out not the case, not if you're going to do it well. So that's number one. Number two is that starting off with what you're trying to accomplish, like who are you trying to serve and in what way, I think is super important. And it's less clear to me in games because I've never worked in the gaming industry or built things like that. But from a business process standpoint, or launching a business or launching a product, it's always like very specific. Who are you building this thing for? And what is it you're trying to do for them? Do you think you could be more fun than the other games out there? Do you think the other games out there are lacking in some way and you're going to close that gap? Like, you got to get pretty specific with your goals so that you can come up with good questions and come up with a good design and something to bring to a team like Zander's and Animus to build out for you. So I think a lot of that thought up front is super important. What I'm curious about, and this is one that I always struggled with, I'm just curious how you approach this, because when you say have a budget, the other thing I know is people have no clue how much stuff costs. And there's no way. And I dealt with that all the time too. How do you manage expectations on that front when someone comes to you and says, I got an idea for a game, like I'm trying to come up with a budget, how much would something like this cost? Like, how do you talk them through that? Because I know it's a challenging area.
Very challenging area. You have to taper expectations to begin with, right? And we've had clients approach us and say, hey, we want to do a AAA quality game. And we're like, okay, what's your budget? I don't know. We're thinking, like $6,000-$7,000 a month. And that's an absolute no.
Right.
That just doesn't work, right? You look at AAA titles and these games are costing $100 million, $80 million. My studio doesn't facilitate AAA style games, first of all, because we're not a AAA studio. If we were a AAA studio, we probably wouldn't be in Web3 and we'd probably be working in the traditional sector and be taking on bigger games and things like that. But tapering expectations, I think, is a good start, right? So if someone wants a AAA style game, what they're saying really is they want the best looking game for the amount of money that they have. So what I typically do is say, hey, I understand you want the best looking game for the amount of money that you can afford. So what we do is we say, listen, we can get with our artists, we can come up with a style, one that can be consistent from start to finish that we can manage and continuously give for this price. And if your budget is, say, $10,000 a month, we could realistically give really good quality product at $10,000 a month, including dev and art. Now, it's not going to, at the end of the day, end up being what someone would get for spending $20, $30, $40,000 a month. But a game can be created on that budget. We can realistically usually offer 2 artists. So at that point, once we have their budget, we can decide how many artists can we put on this? How many developers can we put on this? Do we need sound engineers? How many moving parts are we going to need with this budget? So we look at what they have available up front. We decide what size team we can allocate to continuously build for this project. And that may be creating a plan where we need to take away an artist for a month to meet their budget structure, but that may extend the project by another month because we have one less person working on it. So it's really about critiquing and finding a plan that works best for our clients and making sure that we're still delivering what they're expecting in a timely manner, as quick as possible with what's available to us. And most of our clients are very understanding that without having all the money in the world, you have to find a dev shop that's willing to be creative in how they're going to deliver the end result. We usually start with a minimum viable product. And at MVP stage, it's okay, this is what we're looking at to be the overall product. And once we get the MVP to them, at that point, it's a good indicator if what resources they have and what work we're putting out is going to make the product that they're hoping for.
Yeah, right on. So it comes down to just realigning expectations real early on with reality and helping your customer to understand why that is the reality and how things can work out over the course of 6, 8, 10, 12 months, whatever it is, and then working with them through all of that. Thinking from the standpoint of somebody who's new to this and who's looking for a dev shop, how many Web3 dev companies like Animus Labs are out there? Do you have a sense for that at all?
There's not many. There's not many who build for hire. Most people, they come up with an idea. They find a few developers who have worked on games or are aspiring to work on games. They find onesie, twosie artists, and they just hit the ground running and attempt to make their own game. And from my findings, there's only maybe 6 studios that are willing to build for hire.
Wow.
Within Web3. And then as you can see, looking around the canvas, there's tons and tons of projects.
Yeah,
that are
absolutely.
out here building games.
Yep.
But most of them do it internally. Most of them find their couple devs, and most of them don't launch.
Okay. That's a good point too. Yeah, absolutely. Most of them don't come through.
And I don't mean, I'm not trying to throw shade at all, but a lot of these games don't make it to fruition. It's because it takes a strenuous amount of effort in continuing to build and develop while taking criticism because you may or may not have taken money from clients or from your community ahead of time to start building. We have a little bit of a different sense on how we'd like to build things in-house for our own community is build first and then launch an NFT later, right? Get something built, get something going. A build first mentality is something that we'd like to try to reshape. Now with SmithyDao, that we took that over, the NFTs already existed.
Right.
So now we're trying to catch up and really bring value to that project. Well, I think what we'd like to start seeing from a lot of projects is let's start seeing people build something first. Show the website, show how the game may play, and then attempt to get some movement, get people buying NFTs and things like that once you have something to show for.
Yeah, I like that. Some substance first, because the other thing it does for you is it makes sure that you have realized how hard things are, right? And this is where a lot of these NFT projects launch with big promises and then don't deliver. It's not because they're shitty people. It's because they bit off more than they could chew and they thought it was going to be easier and it wasn't. We just had Oblomov on a couple episodes ago. He's a digital 3D artist and he's done a couple of projects, NFT projects. And he was talking about that. He made sure that he went through all whatever number 1,000 of generative NFTs to make sure everything lined up properly. Because when you're working in 3D, there's just a lot of subtleties. And if it's off, it's going to look terrible. And what happens is a lot of these projects, they kind of get their concept and they get one of them looking really good and they market with it and then they launch and then they sell all the NFTs. And when they don't reveal for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, it's because they're running into all of those problems after the fact. And that's what you're making me think of here is it's like you can make sure that you're heading down a path that you really want to, and that you didn't bite off more that you can chew, and you have your arms around it before you start fundraising in that way by selling stuff to people. And I think that puts you in a good place to control the outcome, which just good advice and a good approach, I'd say. So you're saying most projects tend to go find some devs, roll them together and build, versus go and find one of these 6 or so custom dev shops that will build for hire. What would you say would be the pros and cons of each approach? What's better about building a team versus hiring a dev shop, and vice versa?
So if I were starting a project tomorrow and I was trying to decide, do I just find someone who can get all the pieces in one shot, or if I'm going to onesie twosie find people as I can, it's probably going to cost me the same, right, at the end of the day. So if it's going to cost me about the same at the end of the day, I would probably just go with the shop that can pull together all the pieces that are going to be needed to build this project. I feel like it will be easier. Why? Because if you come to Animus and you say, hey, we want to build this project, this is our thought, this is our idea, we've already sold NFTs, so we have the budget, you don't have to worry about that. What do you think? Me, I'm going to be like, okay, cool, this is a great idea. Why don't we put together a quick budget, see how many people we can bring onto this, and then from there, it's okay, cool. Now you're going to have 2 developers dedicated to your project. You're going to have 1 3D artist, 1 concept artist, and then you're going to have 1 sound engineer. So that person now knows that they're going to have all the pieces they need in order to create this game. All that person's probably going to have to hire for externally, if need be, is a contract developer. And a lot of people do that because the contract's really important, and sometimes they don't want to divvy that out to somebody else to handle. They'll take that on themselves as a founder. They'll find their own contract developer that they feel pretty comfortable.
Probably de-risks
and I've seen that happen
a little bit too, because you feel like there can't be any like trapdoors hidden in there or anything that I don't know about. We control this piece.
And a lot of founders tend to know tons of people in the space, and they have ran across a contract developer that they feel comfortable with, or maybe that person's worked on another project. So I've seen that happen quite often, is where most of these project founders have their own contract developer. But being someone who is trying to decide pros and cons of it, it might be a little pricier to go with a dev shop, something like Animus, than it would be to find your own developers who are aspiring, may not have worked on many projects. So they're like, hey, I'll do this cheap. I'll do this for this price. And when you piece it all together, you may save yourself some money. But in the long run, you're going to run into experience issues. And therefore, it may actually take longer to develop because they're missing intricate pieces that need to be known ahead of time while structuring up your project.
Right on.
So I could see that going 2 ways as an aspiring founder. If I were going to look at it, I personally would probably find a development studio who can find all the pieces, structure the project in a way that I can see start to finish, versus somebody who may not have the best sense on how to funnel and structure that project so that it delivers on time, properly, and functions right.
Yeah, those are good points. And I think another thing people don't really know about software development is the difference between an inexperienced junior dev and a very experienced, very good dev. It's not like they're twice as fast or 3 times as fast. It's 100 times. Like the difference between the best and the worst in software developers it's absurd, the productivity you get out of the really good ones. The trick is, though, they're really hard to find, right? Like, it's really hard to find those like A+ devs. And if you're going to go out and hire your own, especially if you're going to hire juniors that are a little less experienced, are going to charge less, your odds of finding that diamond in the rough are low. It can happen, but it's low. So I do agree with that general sentiment. On paper, it'll probably look like you're paying more at a dev shop than if you were able to pull your own team together. But there are benefits to that. And one is that you get that experience, you get that broad team structure where you guys are going to come to the table with all of the components that are needed. And you already know all of the components that are needed because you've worked on a bunch of different games. So you get that benefit. But you lose a little bit of control. You lose a little bit of, I don't know if it's insight or visibility maybe into the project as it's progressing. Good dev shops will do a good job of keeping you up to date on status and whatnot, but you lose a little bit of visibility to a regular team. So there's pluses and minuses to both sides for sure. So once somebody goes down this path of picking a dev shop, what can they expect from a contracting standpoint? You mentioned $10,000 a month. Do you typically look at monthly budgets, or what are you guys doing? What else have you seen out there?
So it all depends. We're honestly willing to structure it how our clients would like. But in 90% of the time, it's, hey, budget that we see realistic for what you want to deliver is going to cost X price.
Hmm.
We typically charge monthly, so it's a once a month fee, and then we pay out our developers. Usually, we pay them biweekly, so we'll float the biweekly cost based out for the monthly price that we're getting.
Hmm.
So I've also had contracts where someone was like, "Hey, why don't we just pay 6 months up front?" So it just depends on the way the client would like to structure it. And contractually, we have a number of contracts that we have written up, and we can critique them to any way that the client would like. And if it's something that doesn't seem beneficial for Animus as a company, we'll come back and we'll negotiate. And it's like any other contract. You get a contractor for your house, you're going to negotiate price and price of goods. And you may not know what the markup is as the client for the contractor, but at the same time, you got to know that you're getting the best price possible. And the way that Animus looks at it is we're not doing this for profit. We're doing this more so for a name in the space. So as it stands currently, Animus isn't looking to be the behemoth in the room at what we do. What we're looking to do is organically grow, develop good products. That way, our name speaks for ourselves for what we can do.
Hmm.
Not every company out here is just looking to profit off of founders who are wanting to launch stuff. We really just want to grow within the ecosystems. And that starts with giving good prices, contracting properly, and giving realistic dates and hard targets that we think we can hit. And that follows suit with being able to get more contracts because good work definitely speaks for
No,
itself. So
100%. Yeah.
contractually, I think we try to make it as fair as possible. It's important to know that you as a founder, you have enough voice to come back and say, "Hey, that seems really high. Why is it?"
Mhm.
And then see if they have a good enough breakdown. And if it seems like they're going really high, then they might actually be. Or if they have a good breakdown, then maybe you just didn't have the exact idea of what it costs to make some of these things. And sometimes it takes experience of seeing some of these contracts and shopping around because the last thing you want to do is take the first contractor or price that was thrown at you. You may want to say, "Hey, why don't I go see if there's another company that could do this for less?" But sometimes that comes with its own cons, right? Is
Yep.
less isn't always more.
Yep, 100%. And I think that's a great point is you probably should talk to a couple of dev shops to get a different feel for them and ask them a lot of the same questions, right? And ask them about how they do contracting. Ask them about how they keep you up to date as a customer throughout the development process and ask them, can you talk to existing customers? If you got a dev shop that is doing a good job, they should have some people that will talk to you and tell you about their experience. If they can't, provide that might be a red flag. So I think kind of spending some time shopping around is a really good idea because you'll get a very different feel from different teams about how they approach things. And with enough questions, it kind of the differences get to be fairly obvious. And in terms of pricing for software, it's tricky business. It just is. And what I always advise people is don't try to figure out too hard like what's behind the price. And that's the tendency. I want to know if they're telling me it's going to be $100,000 for this thing, how much is it costing them? I want to know what their margin is. Try not to get into that because it's really complicated how the margins work in software development behind the scenes, especially for contract shops with like peaks and valleys and everything else that you got to deal with in terms of keeping a team paid and busy. So don't spend too much time thinking about that. Think about, am I getting good value for that amount of money? Does that amount of money work for my business model? And that's work backwards from that. And if it works and it works good and you trust the shop, then trust the price. Because the more time you spend trying to figure out the price, I think the more like the relationships suffer at the end of the day. And from personal experience, one thing, a shop that I ran, we did hourly rates across the board for everything. And it was like there was an hourly rate and an estimated number of hours. And every month we tell them how many hours we worked, and then we'd send them a bill. And every month I would argue with people about why does it cost this much when Joe does my work versus when Susie does my work? And like all these stupid questions. And it was always a problem. We switched to fixed fees and we actually charged way more, but it was a fixed price. And it said, we're going to do this work and it's going to be $100,000 for you. No matter how, it doesn't matter how long it takes us. You pay $100,000. People loved it. We made way more money. And the people that we were working with were way happier and everything was smoother. And all the time I used to waste arguing with people about Joe's hours versus Susie's hours went away and became productive time for me. So long story short, it's a tough area. Think about the value. Does this work for my business model? Don't worry about anything else, really. I think that's the important thing to focus on. So I'll stop ranting. This shows it's not an interview of me, but I wanted to share my experience.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that point 100% though. We've actually had more success charging flat rates on what we think what the development charge should be than we would if we sat here and gave them every build hour per developer and or engineer, artist. Their eyes would pop if they saw the amount of hours that go in on the flat rate.
Yep.
It's like working salary versus hourly. If someone's working on a salary for $80,000 a year, they put in 60 hours, it doesn't matter. They're getting the same value for that 60 hours, getting the same value out of that person for 80,000, where if the person was hourly, they might be paying 120,000.
Mhm.
So the value is coming off of a upfront fee versus an hourly rate. And that's why you see a lot of companies go with salary, because they know that if more work needs to be produced in a week, they can get that out of that individual. Almost the same can be said for a dev shop. If we give you a flat rate, it doesn't matter if I need to pull in 3 extra hands to get this work done. The same amount of work needs to get done in that time than if I was billing you
Absolutely.
out. In most cases, you founders are going to get a better rate at a flat fixed rate. You're going to get more value out of that than you are if someone's charging you out.
Yeah, and it's certainly get a better
opinion.
experience because you can structure everything around that then. You know what your budgets are going to be, as opposed to, and if you've ever hired a contractor to fix something in your house, you've probably experienced this too, right? Like they say, oh, we'll do your bathroom, it's going to be 10 grand. And then they're like, oh, but we ran into problems and now it's 17 grand. But you budgeted 10 and now you get a quote. Same thing, right? If you're doing a software job and you get a fixed price and it holds, everything else is smooth because you can build your business model around it. But if you get those surprises late, now your business model needs to adjust and you got to find money, you got to move things around. And it's stressful and it leads to a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think that's a great way to be thinking about it as a founder. So I kind of want to wrap up this portion of it and move on to talking about some of the SmithyDao stuff. But still 2 or 3 more questions and we'll bring it to a close. One is, what have you seen from founders and teams, if you will, that have made them successful? What are the qualities or what are the behaviors or practices of good clients of yours, good customers of yours, that end up having successful projects?
I've found that the most successful projects are those that put their community first. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. In crypto, in Web3, the community always voices their opinions on what they feel is going to be best for the project. Sometimes it gets convoluted. Sometimes communities don't always know what's exactly going to be best for the company side of things or the development side of things, but they can see what's going to be best to continuously bring in new people and have foresight on what keeps that community together. Speaking specifically like Treasure, right? The community continues to grow within Treasure as more games start to surface and more communities come together, and the community itself around Treasure grows due to more games coming. So what's bringing those games? I would like to speak about Treasure is, I think everyone believes that this calamity, this bringing together of all these games and being able to launch them all from one central location is what's bringing such a high level of success. Now, obviously the games and the platforms that are on there, they speak for themselves individually, but as a whole, Treasure also has a voice that speaks to the broader community, right? So I think it's this idea of communities within a larger community is where you see a lot of success. Is a lot of when a community can circulate around one body, but can have more projects to be happy about. And you see a lot of success come from that. What else? Companies and founders that are frivolous with the money that they do raise from their NFTs, right? Some of these founders, they'll sell out NFTs and then go blow that same money in the same month. What are you doing to further the project, right? If you're going to blow all the money that you just made, you're not bringing any added value to that project, right? Therefore, most of your NFT holders who are probably going to get caught holding the bag now are going to move on to the next thing where they can actually go create value or hold their value in what they're holding.
Yep. Yeah, that goes back to having the plan from go. What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And what's the budget to do so? because then you can price your NFT projects to suit that budget and then drive the money that way.
Yeah, I think if your goal is to create just a JPEG collection, then do that, but make it the greatest community that you possibly can and stay around, stick around. Make sure you have this sense of these people belong here. They own something that is really unique. I don't talk bad about anybody in the space, and I will never name specific projects, but you have too many people who come up with an NFT project. It comes out, there's no real plan. There's just these images and they're really cool and everyone loved them. So it sold out, but then nothing happens afterwards. What I would like to see happen is more of these projects turn a little more company structured, where they have a plan. They have something else they'd like to do after, once they have this money. And if they want to pocket some of it, sure, they took their hard work. It costs money to have things developed. Contracts don't just poof overnight, right? And it took work to get the artwork done and things like that. So you got to pay people, but you always want to constantly think, what's next? What am I going to do next? How can I incorporate this into something else and continue to further the benefit my holders and my community?
Totally agree with that. And that's a theme that keeps coming up is I'd like to see just a little bit more professionalism and a little bit more focus on value creation in this space as opposed to accumulation, right? Like the accumulation, it kind of takes care of itself if you create value over and over again. And it's hard to believe that sometimes, but that is how the world works.
That is.
The flip of that question, what do you see, and you touched on it a little bit, but is there anything else that you see from teams that don't succeed? Are there any kind of common pitfalls that you've run into with customers?
I would argue that it's the same pitfalls that exist in traditional business. You stop when you get stuck, right? You catch momentum, you fill this community up, you have 15,000 people in your Discord, 30,000 people on your Twitter. Everyone's buzzing when the bull market's here. You sell out everything that you ever create. Bear comes, people start dropping like flies, and you give up. You say, that's it. The bear happened. I'm done. We're out of money. Maybe you mismanaged funds. That's got to stop. People need to start being a little better with their funds that are coming into their projects. And believe that the community's still there. They may be lurking in the Discord. Maybe not many people are talking. That doesn't mean they're not there.
Yep.
That means something exciting hasn't happened. Maybe you're not developing something that's bringing them back in yet. Or maybe you are developing and what you are creating hasn't caught traction yet. You're at that point that is just about to flip and you're just about to get over that hill. But instead of riding that bike to the top of the hill so that you can ride back down, you just let go of the pedals and you ride backwards and now you just gave up and you are almost there.
Yep.
So sadly, you see people give up, or maybe they didn't give up. Maybe before they fully made it and had a sustainable traction, they just decided, hey, I don't think we can do this.
Yeah, just ran out of gas, ran out of push.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it happens. And these things are hard.
You see it happen a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
That's why
and it's hard
like
to,
you said, regular
happy.
businesses fail too. Look at the business failure rates. They're extremely high. Software development project failure rates, not in Web3, but in the history of software development, absurdly high. So yeah, this stuff is hard and it takes a lot of persistence and stubbornness to be successful, no doubt. So I think that's good advice, good thing for the listener to think about as they get ahead. So if somebody wants to reach out to you guys, want to learn more about the work you're doing, where can they go?
So we have our website. It's animuslabs.io. They can always go to our website and shoot us an email if they have something that they're thinking about building. You can hit us on Twitter. We have our own Discord. You can come to the Smithy Lab or the SmithyDao Discord and chat with us there. There's plenty of ways to reach out to us. We're always available. One of us are always at the computer because we all live around the world. So at any given time, one of us is up and willing to reach back out.
No, that was a bonus that we didn't even talk about from working with a dev shop, is you might have all your time zones covered. You might have that 24 by 7 by 365 support that you might not have if you have a team, certainly if everyone's in the same time zone. Another thing to think about. But no, this has been awesome, Zander. Software development is hard. It is hard to find a good dev shop. So be prepared to ask lots of good questions. Know what you're trying to accomplish. Have a budget in mind. Be flexible. And expect to do some work as a client, too. I think that's a good frame out for finding a dev shop. Zander, appreciate it. And Animus Labs doing all kinds of cool stuff. So thanks for taking the time to come and share this with us.
Hey, Phil, thank you. This has been fantastic. It's also really fun to talk about the industry as a whole. What can people do? How can they get into it? And I enjoy it. I myself started off not a developer, right? I started off as someone who had a vision, and it's starting to take off, right? And we hit that part where we got stuck for a little bit, and we pushed through. We just kept pushing through, and the success is starting to pay off. The projects are starting to come along, and that goes for any founder. Don't give up. Keep pushing through. You'll find success.
That's awesome, man. Keep doing it, and look forward to seeing all kinds of good stuff from you guys in the years to come. And speaking of that, we're going to come right back, and the second part of this episode, we're going to talk all about SmithyDao. So to the listener, thanks for listening here today, and be ready in the next day or two for the second part of this episode to drop.
Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter at GitSmol, GITSMOL. Learn more at getsmol.com.